There's a tweet several weeks ago from Matt Walsh after a tragic situation in Texas that took the life of a young man and has now turned into a massive debacle over race in America. Matt Walsh put out this tweet, and I think people found this an issue, and I myself included, and I don't care how much people come for me in the comments. Young black men are violent to a wildly, outrageously disproportionate degree. Okay. So the people who were involved in this, the victim's dad, repeatedly asked not to make this about race, repeatedly try to offer up a degree of mercy to the situation. This has now exploded into a whole nother.
But that's him giving into the race hustlers.
And that's and so like to then go after the victim's dad is just gross.
Ugh.
It's just gross. So Matt Walsh makes this statement. He doesn't provide data to support this.
Yep.
He doesn't provide any studies to support this. He throws this out. And I've went over the numbers, and we can go into numbers later again. But Nerdy Christian, who I've had on the channel before, there's a lot me and him disagree on in terms of some of his liberal-leaning views. But he responded to Matt Walsh. I responded to Matt Walsh, going over some of the actual math. How many black men are in America? How many murders are committed? How many violent crimes are committed? How common is this sort of stuff? And you basically come to the conclusion that there's less than 1%, about 1% of the situation of black men committing these violent crimes. Nerdy Christian responded, went back and forth with him. He responded to Nerdy Christian, didn't really have a lot of arguments, just kind of attacked him and just kind of clowned him. And so I wanted to react to that because I think this is an important conversation. And by the way, the reason why I'm reacting to this is the same reason why I push back against Fresh and Fit. The same reason I push back. So when Fresh and Fit frame women today, women today don't deserve anything. Women today are all hypergamous. Women today are all modern women that just want to let the alpha lay and make the beta pay and trick you. It's the same exact framework. It's too small of a sample size of a specific type of woman in a specific type of city that you keep coming across because you want to go out to the club at night. So I think that the miscalculation on both Fresh and Fit towards women today and in Matt Walsh in this situation, not all situations, but in this situation, I think it's the same thing. It's an issue with selection bias.
Okay.
You're using too small of a sample size, and then you're extrapolating that, and you're making a hasty generalization fallacy about all women today or about all young black men. Okay. So Nerdy Christian responded.
Influencers who are angry at me for my take on the Austin Metcalf murder. And I guess we missed this guy. He's a Christian influencer responding to my tweet about the Austin Metcalf killing, where I talk about how young black males are disproportionately violent. And this guy goes by the handle Nerdy Christian and is a bit of a following.
That's me.
But he didn't like that very much. And here's what he has to say. Listen. I just cannot imagine at this point in time using the term problematic unironically as he does here. Yeah, that's problematic.
He shouldn't have used that term. I told him stay away from all the woke language.
Yeah.
Stop saying problematic. Don't say systemic.
He did the same thing in the debate.
Yeah, don't do that.
And they kept getting him torched in the chat.
Yeah, don't do that because you're because the merits of your argument will be viewed through the lens of the type of language you use, and if you're using liberal language, you're instantly going to get torched.
Yes.
Sorry, guys, that's a bit problematic. That's problematic language. I've already tuned you out the moment you do that. You've advertised yourself at the outset as a kind of limp-wristed, pretentious wimp, and I can't take you seriously.
Yes, a very Christ-like speech, Matt. Certainly abiding by Colossians 4:6, except not really. It's also quite the ad hominem. You're ignoring the substance of my argument, which was that implicit bias exists, and you were displaying it with your generalization of an entire race of young men. But hey, whatever. Go off, King.
Also, notice what he doesn't do.
Go off, King is kind of funny.
As we saw with the other influencers who were angry, as we always see in these situations, he doesn't dispute my point. My point about the data, about the demographics and the data, who's committing the majority of violent crime and so on. That was my point.
So
he doesn't dispute.
So pause it. Matt, I would love to debate you on this. I will debate you on this in a heartbeat. You want to talk about data? We can talk about data. We can talk about the 52% of crimes are committed by black men. That's false. That study's been debunked by the FBI. So if you want to go into the data and have we can have an in-person debate on this topic. I think it's interesting he went after Nerdy Christian, even though our video performed fairly well too. Maybe they were just looking at short form content. Yeah. But I would love to debate you on this. And I don't have to attack you. I don't have to make fun of your beard or your glasses. I don't have to do any of that sort of stuff. But I would love to debate you on this.
He doesn't present any kind of counter argument. He doesn't say, well, Matt is wrong about this point, and here's the data to back me up. He doesn't do that. None of them ever do.
I did that.
All the people get offended and they start blubbering about how it's problematic. They never, ever.
I never said it was problematic. I just said you were wrong based on the data.
Attempt to dispute the actual point because they can't. So, I mean, that's all that really needs to be said. You don't offer a rebuttal. So there's no argument to refute here. You didn't present one.
Good, sir. The video you're responding to was never intended as a direct rebuttal. Did you listen to the first 10 seconds?
Sometime tomorrow, I want to talk about why this is really problematic and racist. But first, I want to get ahead of that.
And that's another mistake he made, is then you say racist. Like, don't, because what it does is then you're labeling it. Deal with the substance of the argument. Why is the argument? Why is the generalization that young black men, which is a very broad group of people,
Super.
why is that inaccurate to the reality? And why is the burden on proof is actually on Matt Walsh? When you say young black men at a disparate, you got to give me something to work with. Because there's no studies that show that. There are studies that he's quoted that are dated studies, or I don't know if he's quoted, but people have quoted 52% of murders or 52% of violent crime is committed by black people. That study is not accurate anymore, according to the FBI statistics.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Exposing a misconception that I think a lot of us have about racism and what it is.
As you can see, the purpose of my video was not to rebut your data, which you never specify, but I did present to you an argument. It just wasn't the one that you wanted. The purpose of my original clip was to level set. It was to lay the groundwork, because we have to lower defenses when we talk about this topic, so that so often go up when we discuss racism, because no one wants to feel like they're being compared to the KKK. You actually came out all right because of this too, because I obviously had an issue with what you said, but I wasn't calling you a racist. It's kind of funny that you get so offended, because I was specifically pointing out that anyone can fall victim to implicit bias, as I believe that you have. So you shouldn't even have felt uniquely called out. But anyways, hey, challenge accepted. Let's dispute your actual point, or rather two actual points, because you engage in racism twice in your original tweet in kind of slightly different ways. So we'll address first the general accusation that you make at the end, that young black men are violent to a wildly, outrageously disproportionate degree.
Foundationally, I've said this in my earlier video, the reason why this argument doesn't work is because we could find aspects that young white men are wildly disproportionate at to a crazy degree.
Yeah.
That's not an indictment of all white men or white culture.
Come on.
Right? We're talking DUI, we're talking school shooting in the actual definition of a school shooting,
Incest.
mass shooting, bestiality.
Goodness gracious.
All of those things, young white men are disproportionately
Excelling at.
We don't take that and say, see, white culture is corrupt.
Yeah.
We don't do that. Why? Because we understand there's a very small percentage and a small fragment of the greater population that is doing these things. And that small sample size is not enough to extrapolate and say, this is now an indictment on all white men.
Yeah.
By the way, this is how the left argues. Is this not what we hear on the left of towards police officers?
Yeah.
Right? So you take a very small sample of police officers that wild out, and then you extrapolate that, and you said, see, police officers is racist. It's like, wait a minute, you're arguing like a liberal by doing this sort of thing, because the sample size is too small to extrapolate. Go ahead.
Since you don't actually cite any specific data and just vaguely refer to some boogeyman that you call the data, I'm going to guess that you're referring to the fact that a disproportionate share of violent crime is committed by black men relative to their share of the population. I'm guessing that you're talking about the fact that 14% of this population has been arrested for over 40% of violent crime over the last 10 years, according to the FBI.
So remember that data? So now, that's what the actual data is, 40%, not 52%.
Yeah.
So out the rip, anyone that's floating that number around is wrong.
Yeah.
Now, that's still alarming. That's still an alarming number.
Yeah.
Right? 12%, 40%. That's still that is a disproportionate number. The question is it disproportionate enough to hypergeneralize an entire demographic of people and say there's now an issue with black culture and black people in general? As if either black people are just more violent, or black culture as a whole makes them more violent.
However, it's worth noting that's arrests, not convictions. So this ignores the 50% of violent crime that goes uncleared each year, meaning that no arrest is made. So I'd even take everything here with a little bit of a grain of salt. There are reasons that this could be, that the actual figures could be lower or higher here.
That's right.
Which I'll
So 40%, that's arrests, that's not convictions. In certain instances, those don't lead to convictions. Certain instances that do. People would argue that black people are more likely to get convicted. So the jury's out on that.
Yeah.
I'll display in some text right here. But yeah, let's run with it. Say we have 40% of violent crimes committed by black men. The thing is, once you glance past that surface stat, the holes quickly become apparent. And this is where your racist bias shows, Matt. What ratio of black men are committing these crimes? Is it a large enough ratio to label young black men across the board as violent? No, you've fallen victim to the hasty generalization fallacy. So let's unpack this. Yes, 40% of violent crime seems to be committed by black males, but what proportion of black males commit these crimes? Well, there's actually no way to tell quite for sure with the data that's available, at least not over a multi-year period. We don't have a count of the actual crimes or the actual criminals for each category. We just know the count of crimes. Different people commit more than one crime. We don't know the number of convictions. We just know the arrests. So things get pretty messy. But we do know from this DOJ report that over a 10-year period, roughly 44% of individuals who were previously incarcerated for violent crimes will recidivate for another violent crime.
Okay, so that right there already skews the math.
Yeah.
That means that when a crime is committed, 44% of the people that have committed this said violent crime have previously committed the crime before.
Yes.
Okay. So you're already dealing with data that, again, small percentage of people committing a large percentage of the crime,
Yeah.
right? Not 1 out of 5 black men are walking around committing violent crimes.
Yeah,
1 out of 10 black men are walking around committing, right? It's probably, according to the data, 1 out of 100 black men have committed some sort of violent crime. And that's that's removing the fact of repeat offenders. So when you factor in repeat offenders, I would guess, and when I did the math, it's probably less than a percent, right?
Yeah.
So less than 1% of black men are committing this. So this whole like black men are violent, black culture is violent. It's like, no, you're dealing with less than 1% of the population.
Come on.
Go ahead.
So we have the total violent crime count for black Americans over 10 years here, an estimation of 80% of it being attributable to men, and that recidivism rate. And with that, we can calculate an estimate of about 1.25 million black men having committed violent crimes in the last 10 years, which comes out to just about just over 1 in 20. That's a far cry from your generalization that all young black men are violent to a wildly, outrageously disproportionate degree. Now, to my next point, it's obvious that the color of one's skin is not the causal factor. What's the causal factor here?
Okay, so did everybody catch that? So over I think you said 20 years, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, 20 years, 1 in 20, right? Over the course of 20 years, when you reduce that to a year, it's less than 1%. And that, again, that's not factoring in repeat criminals.
Yep.
So then he gets into some of the causal reasons. Go ahead.
That's what you want to talk about. That's what would need to be changed. If you want to talk about an issue in a population, you should talk about the causal factors behind that issue. Obviously, the color of their skin is not the causal factor. Now,
well, I don't think Matt would make that point, to be fair to Matt.
Yeah.
Matt would argue culture.
Yeah, he would probably argue culture, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And so to me, I would say, what is culture? Right? And so, but again, is black culture or white culture too broad of a generalization?
Yes.
I would say yes. I would say yes. I think when you start saying this group of culture, because black culture in California is different than black culture in Mississippi.
Come on.
Is different than black culture in New York.
Yeah.
Is different than black culture in a middle-class neighborhood.
Same with white culture.
Same thing with white culture.
With all those the same regions, it's going to be drastically
different.
Yeah.
If you're talking white culture in California, you're going to get more of the yuppie, hippie, yoga, latte approach. If you go down south, it's going to be more of the southern hospitality white. If you go to West Virginia, you're going to get some trailer park white people.
Yep.
If you so
West Virginia.
And so you're going to get different people. If you go along the poverty line, you probably start tapping into white gangs, biker gangs.
Yeah.
Very different culture. But white biker gangs is very different than soccer moms in Encinitas.
Yeah.
Very different culture.
Yeah.
Right. So again, is this too broad of a generalization to say white culture or black culture? I think so. Because again, remove this for police culture. Police culture is too violent. Police culture is too racist. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
This is why it was problematic to say these sorts of things towards police. Because when you actually did the math, it was like, wait a minute, wait. This is such a rare occurrence, and it happens so infrequently. It's not as prevalent as we think it is. Now, when it does happen, we should have consequences for police that act out.
Yeah.
Right? And so this was people rightfully so pushing back against some of the police or racist narrative.
Obviously, it's the culture that I'm talking about. But first, one, you didn't say anything about that culture. You implied that if one had to guess the race of an assailant in an altercation, here, we'll put your tweet back up here. You said if someone had to guess the race of the assailant in an altercation that involved a white man and a black man, that the black man would clearly be the assailant. That's what you implied.
Yeah, and again, you would need more details than that.
Yeah.
If I said, hey, 2 guys got into a confrontation, one of them had face tattoos, and one of them died, you're probably going to think the guy with the face tattoos killed the other guy.
Yeah.
Right? But you just say, guess the race. You got to give me more to work with than just the race.
If the black guy's wearing a suit, now which one do you think got stabbed and died?
Right.
So it's like.
Statistically, though, this makes no sense. And you're going to say probably, well, yeah, black men commit crimes at a disproportionate degree. To which I say, yeah, and they're the victims of crimes to a disproportionate degree too. The misguided way in which you have applied the statistic means that the black man in this imaginary scenario of yours is both more likely to be the offender and to be the victim. Now, obviously, the way in which you've applied the data, even on a purely statistical basis here, we've shown is kind of nonsense. I'm going to hold you to what you said, too. You didn't say anything about culture or any other actual causal variables. You said something about race. We all know that if you added a detail to your imaginary scenario that the black man, say, was in a suit and tie and the white man was in a wife beater, the vast majority of people would assume that the white man was the perpetrator. But why is this? Why does that make a difference? Because it's not about race, dude, and you know that. Race is not the active variable.
Right.
Funny enough, while you say black culture,
Which is kind of ironic.
Because here's my opinion.
Why are we telling Matt Walsh it's not about race?
That's the thing.
He did
This should be beneath Matt Walsh.
He did the racism documentary.
Right.
Am I a racist?
Right.
The whole meme was that it's not about color.
It's not about color. Right? That's the frustrating part about it. Go ahead.
Is the problem. The very conservative scholar Thomas Sowell argues that black culture is merely derived from poor white Southern sharecropper culture. So what you're really...
I love that he quoted conservative voices
Yeah.
in all of his citations. Thomas Sowell is a black conservative that all folks on the right love and hold him in high esteem.
Yeah.
So he's pointing out, according to Thomas Sowell, that you're conflating it again.
Yep.
involves both blacks and whites. But you know what? I would disagree with you that the primary variable is culture in the first place. That's not what the data shows. The data shows that the variables that affect the rates of crime, known as criminogenic factors, they're not primarily of race or culture, but rather things much more common to us all. This study from the Brookings Institution found
Another conservative source. The Brookings Institute, if you guys didn't know, again, a thing that I agree with, that I've heard almost all these conservatives talking about, do these three things, you will overcome poverty. You will overcome generational poverty. Do you guys know what the three things are? You remember what they are, Zach?
Stay married.
No, graduate high school.
Graduate high school.
Get a full-time job.
Get a full-time job.
Get married before you have kids.
Come on. That's a low bar.
98% of people who do those three things end up breaking the cycle of poverty that they come from.
Crazy.
Brookings Institute. This is often beloved and quoted by conservatives all the time.
Yep.
From the Dennis Pragers to, I'm not talking just one side I'm talking everybody quotes this. So it's great that he's quoting the Brookings Institute as a way to show that, like, he's not pulling leftist crazy propaganda stuff. Go ahead.
This happen when you control for criminogenic factors. 1, the racial disparities in crime disappear, and 2, the racial disparities in police shootings also seem to disappear. The fact is that much of what we as a society attribute to race on both the left and the right is really attributable to underlying factors of class, environment, trauma, unemployment, education, etc. So
Okay, so this is kind of what I was saying, was that, like, if you were to remove, and don't take this out of context, if you were to remove black people from the United States entirely, and given their history, they tend to be a large population of them tend to make up the lower socioeconomic classes in America because of the history, right?
Right.
If you were to remove all of that, there would still be a portion of white folks that would make up that lower socioeconomic class. And my point would be, like, those people would just make up the same crime statistics. But it would just look watered down.
Yep.
But they would just make up for the same amount of crime that was happening when that portion was taken up with black folks. And so it's kind of what he's saying. It's like, it's more about socioeconomics,
Right.
And it's a class thing. It's what you're saying.
It's a class thing.
Yeah.
It's a class thing in terms of where these people live, the density of these populations, the access to different education, so on and so forth. Like, it's a holistic thing that impacts a specific type of people living in a specific type of environment. And most people don't know, because most people don't know middle-class black people. That's the sad part. Like, here, let me give you guys a real example. If you go to Maryland, in Maryland, there are middle-class black communities.
What?
Like, six-figure, everyone owns their homes. The neighborhoods are predominantly black, right? Bowie, outside of the DC area, there's suburbs all over there.
Yeah.
Those communities are not high in crime. Those communities are not out here doing what's happening in Chicago or in the projects of Atlanta or New York.
They brought crime to middle class neighborhoods. It wasn't like that. It's like
that's not what happened.
They were middle class and they ended up being just like all the other middle class folk.
Yes. Same thing in parts of Atlanta. There are middle class black neighborhoods, middle class areas that are not experiencing the same things that you're seeing happen in poor areas in terms of the crime rates. And most of the crime is happening where people live in proximity to each other, against each other, because of these socioeconomic factors. And it sucks. Like, it's sad that this is what people are dealing with. Again, someone said, are you seriously trying to make the argument that groups of specific races can't have disproportionate problems that affect them versus other races? I'm saying, if you consider poor white people living in close proximity with each other, and then you consider that to poor black people and living in close proximity with each other, I don't think you're going to find different massive disparities in black people just being disproportionately more violent. No, I don't think that's a thing. And I think you have to have that data and provide the proof on that. The burden of proof is on you. I think most people know what someone is talking about when they say black culture. And again, to me, this is too broad of a generalization, because we don't connect white culture to be DUI or school shooter. Too broad of a generalization. You can say poor intercity culture. You can say gangster rap culture. You can say drill culture. You can say so many other things. But to say black culture is more violent, to me, shows you don't know many black people, because there are upper class, middle class black people that do not behave the way you see on your TikTok feed, that aren't more violent, that aren't beating up people and joining gangs. That's the reality. And if you don't know these people, that's an issue with your selection bias and who you're exposing to. Going full circle to the fresh and fit thing. Women are hypergamous. Women just want to let the alpha lay, find the big alpha guy, and just let them do whatever they want, and then make the beta pay and raise the alpha baby, because women are hypergamous. It's in their nature. Then when you really get to the layer beneath it, what he's really talking about is modern women. Then when you get a layer beneath that, he's not just talking about modern women, he's talking about modern women in major cities who go to the nightlife. Oh, so you're dealing with a selection of women that have been indoctrinated around hyper weirdo feminist ideologies with access to self-destructive activities, so on and so forth. When you factor all that in, then it would make sense that those women would behave that way. But to hyper generalize women and say women today, modern women, it's too broad of a spectrum to say this. And the same thing happens about men, by the way. Same thing gets hyper generalized about men. These are too broad. And so what happened, the reason why this is important is because we view men and women as image bearers. Men and women as image bearers. We view black people, white people as image bearers. We view all people who are created in the image of God as reflecting God's value, unique design, intrinsic value. When we do these things, when we hyper generalize, it distorts our perversion. It distorts and perverts our view of image bearers. So you start seeing women as sluts and whores. Women are just all sluts and whores, right? If you're consuming red pill content, if you're listening to the stuff Matt Walsh is saying about young black men, now all young black men are violent, and so your view of someone is perverted, right? Instead of all the other social cues that go into, well, how's he dressed? Does he have face tattoos? What are all the other variables considering the person you're now interacting with that are cues in communication? There's a chasm of a difference of meeting an OnlyFans model at the club and meeting an attractive woman at church. There's a chasm of a difference of meeting a black man who is in a specific part of the community and around a potential gang versus meeting a black man in the library. There's a chasm of a difference there, right? And so what we're doing is we're hyper generalizing. It's called the hasty generalization fallacy. And then that's perverting and distorting our view of image bearers. And Matt, as a Catholic, should not want any group of people to have their view distorted. That doesn't mean that there's not real conversations that we could have about the implications of gangster rap music and what are the downstream effects of people that consume gangster rap music? What are the downstream effects of young black kids in the Bronx that are listening to drill rap, which in my opinion is absolutely demonic and satanic? We could have that conversation. But to hypergeneralize is black culture. right? I just think that's too broad, and I think it creates harm for people who really love Jesus. Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Please be sure to comment below and subscribe and all that good stuff. And check out this other video that YouTube seems to be recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.